What you listening to, son?
I don't think you like it.
Well, why not? I like this new generation of music.
Sorry I couldn't play the song without getting sued by Disney, so, try putting it in yourself after this upload. Yeah, do that.
Mother of God, it's all toilet sounds.
So now that the Fix saga is over and done with, people have been asking me to say something about K-pop Demon Hunters. I guess it's understandable that people would want me to talk about this one with its explosion in popularity. I thought about what I could bring to the table, as it's already pretty easy to talk about why this movie is so much fun. It has a well-written story, good pacing, engaging characters, mesmerizing art style, and it has some interesting themes about abusive parenting and identity. It's a really great movie, but I didn't feel like it was something that I needed to review, as it was already getting a lot of recognition from other reviewers. I was more focused on promoting something that got the raw end of the deal due to Netflix's shitty marketing. But after thinking about it, I did think of a way to talk about this movie without it being a full review. Yep, it's another comparison piece between two studios. You know, I've been doing those a lot lately. One of the biggest contributions to the success of K-pop Demon Hunters is its incredible soundtrack. Not a single song or score in this movie was bad. Everything from the orchestra to the lyrics to the vocal performances to the rhythm and tempo of each musical number was on point and tightly directed. I can't emphasize enough how phenomenal the music in this movie is. It is layered in so much passion, variety, energy, flow, smoothness, and character. As a matter of fact, the songs are actually more popular than the movie itself. And it's definitely deserved, because this is one of the most fire soundtracks for a movie I've heard in a long time. It's just so wholly original and not trying to imitate any sort of recent music trends going on, something that Disney has strangely been lacking lately. I get that it's really easy to kick Disney while they're down, but out of all the things they should get right, it should at least be the music for their movies. Their films are world-renowned for memorable melodies, songs with creative lyrics that explore the characters, soothing and bombastic orchestras, and there just hasn't been any of that lately. So why exactly is this? Maybe we can see what the cause is and figure out if there's something Disney can learn from K-pop Demon Hunters. But to do that, we'd have to really look at the music they've been putting out recently, whether it's their live-action remakes or animated films. I'm not gonna do a deep dive analysis of every single song Disney has put out recently, as that's not the purpose of the video, but I want to see if I can at least pick up a pattern that's been going on with their newer songs. And I think one consistent problem with these songs is that they're trying way too hard to recreate Disney's next viral hit, like what happened with Frozen, Tangled, Moana, or Encanto. They don't seem to have a unique style and are always going for this grandiose, overly theatrical approach which feels way too operatic. On a surface level, it doesn't sound like a problem, as they should be putting a lot of energy into these musical numbers, until you realize that the tone of these songs don't properly match the movie they're being used for. For example, Disney's live-action defiling of Snow White has a soundtrack that's way too bombastic for the story they're adapting. It's a gentle fairy tale with a heroine who's supposed to have a soft-spoken nature, and that aspect of her character is reflected in her singing. Her vocal tone is supposed to be gentle and light, which makes sense because her character is meant to be a motherly figure that takes on a lot of responsibility, and has a nurturing spirit to the dwarves and her animal friends. The remake didn't get the memo in its attempt to turn the character into a more action-oriented girl boss, and now her singing is completely out of character. She's extremely bombastic and loud, putting too much operatic force into her vocal performance. It's trying to be theatric, but that doesn't work as an adaptation for how the music in the original was performed. All of the songs in the remake are like this. Even if you subtract things like Gal Gadot's horrific auto-tuning, they still suffer from a level of energy that doesn't fit the nature of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It sounds like it's trying to be Hamilton, and that's not what people wanted from an adaptation of Snow White. They wanted music that feels faithful and familiar to the original movie, but because they wanted to make this movie seem more epic and quote-unquote mature than the cartoon, they lost sight of that, and now the movie's soundtrack is an overly sporadic mess. And it's not just Snow Not White that's guilty of this, it's also Wish. You can tell from the overbearing tone of the soundtrack that their concern wasn't making songs unique to this movie. They just wanted the next Let It Go, or I See the Light, or How Far I'll Go, or We Don't Talk About Bruno. They weren't thinking about making songs with comprehensible lyrics or making sure they properly represent the story and characters being shown. As a result, every song was a repetitive tonal mess. All of them sound like generic pop songs you would hear on Radio Disney with some of the worst lyrics you could possibly put into a musical. I mean, look at this shit. It looks like something an AI came up with and they made no effort to add to it whatsoever. There's no synergy to these lyrics at all. They're just making a bunch of random references to outer space because they're singing about stars. Half the time they don't even use the words correctly. Like this one, we're all just little nebulae in a nursery. That's not how it works. Nebulae are nurseries. They can't just be a nursery because they're one and the same. Or how about this one? When it comes to the universe, we're all shareholders. That's not even the right word. It's stakeholders, not shareholders. It grinds the song to a halt, and it's so obviously wrong that it's shocking that not a single person at Disney pointed this out. And that's not even the worst one. The worst one is without a doubt, Look Out World, Here I Are. Are you fucking kidding me? Not only is this grammatically incorrect for the sake of rhyming with star, but it's so easy to fix that a child could have done it. All they had to do was swap one word and change the lyric to, Look Out World, Here We Are. Adults got paid millions of dollars to come up with this garbage. This is absurd. This is exactly why people say Wish was written by bots, because no functioning human being who isn't a giant retard would pass this off as a coherent combination of words for a song. Even without the horrific lyrics, the melodies and instrumentations and vocal patterns reek of shallow keys that just scream. We rushed all this out after one draft. None of them properly reflect the setting and are just there for the sake of adding songs because it's a Disney movie. It reminds me of what they did with Mufasa, another horrible movie with horrible songs. Every single one is just there for the sake of selling a soundtrack to people. They don't do anything to explore the world or advance the chemistry of the characters. You could cut every song out of the film and it would change nothing. And maybe it's just a me thing, but I honestly think the songs in Mufasa are far worse than any of the songs in Snow, Not White, and Wish combined, because they have all the worst traits of the songs from both movies and more. Horrible, incomprehensible lyrics that sound like they were written by a robot, tonally deaf and not fitting the vibe of the story and setting. Vocal performances that don't match the established personalities of the characters. And what makes these songs even worse is that they actively contradict the development of the characters for the sake of forced foreshadowing. All that time Scar spent singing about wanting a brother? Pointless because he decides to kill him over being stuck in the friend zone. Oh, and get a load of this horseshit lyric from his villain song.
How do I ever unsee what I've seen? He was my kid, she was my queen.
She was your queen? Fuck you, you treating women like property misogynist. You had one conversation with her in the entire movie, and it was just you being a bumbling buffoon while hitting on her. You never interacted with Sarabi in any romantic way. You virtually had no interaction with her at all. What makes you think she was your queen? This is exactly why this version of Scar is so loathsome. Because his villain motivation is so fucking pathetic and petty and ham-fisted into the movie just for the sake of making this prequel match with the continuity of the original film. It highlights how awful and detestable he is, and how utterly pathetic it is that the movie wants you to sympathize with him. These three movies are the prime example of how badly Disney is missing the magic from their musical numbers. I didn't even bother going into Moana 2 because of how painfully obvious it was that it was originally going to be an episodic series on Disney Plus before being horribly retooled into a movie. With that in mind, you can easily figure out why the songs in that movie don't work. These songs aren't just bad. They are some of the worst songs in Disney's history. The only thing keeping them being tied for the #1 spot is the racism from Peter Pan. The structure behind them is completely jaded, and in the case of Wish, it was because there was absolutely zero communication between the songwriters and the storytellers. There was no creative process behind them. Disney just told them to make an I Want song, and a villain song, and a protagonist empowering song. It gives you the impression that Disney didn't even want songs for these movies. They're completely childish and don't do anything to further the story because they don't properly translate the characters' desires. It also leads to a really strong disconnection between the setting and music, making the songs sound incredibly dated. The figures of speech and more bombastic sounding beats in the music are too modern for the time period and atmosphere depicted in their respective movies. It's what feeds into the feeling that Disney just wants to make another viral hit instead of making authentic songs for these films, because it isn't what they want. Songs in a movie are good when they capture a character's emotions in a moment of their story and the audience can feel that. You can't do that if your main priority is following a trend. The songs in these movies end up chasing after a formula, copying something Lin-Manuel Miranda did in one of his previous movies that just happened to become a viral hit and run that into the ground. The songs in older Disney movies, especially the Renaissance era, weren't chasing after a formula. They were made with the story, characters, and setting in mind. They got character actors to sing them instead of banking on star power, which resulted in them feeling a lot more character-driven. The lyrics were actually comprehensible, letting you know how the characters were feeling while driving the story in musical form. And on top of that, they weren't just milking a single person bone dry for all their worth. The Disney Renaissance era had a wide variety of talent behind the songs and music for The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan. It wasn't just one person. It was an entire ensemble of lyricists and composers who were allowed to communicate with the writers for their stories. Alan Menken, Howard Ashman, Glenn Slater, David Zippel, Steven Schwartz, Elton John, Phil Collins, Hans Zimmer, Tim Rice, Michael Starobin, Jerry Goldsmith, Matthew Wilder, Mark Mancina, a huge variety of exceptionally talented songwriters and conductors who were able to properly collaborate with the team. A lot of people put the blame on Lin-Manuel Miranda for the current rut Disney is in with their musicals, but those people are stupid and not paying attention to the actual problem. It's not Lin's fault, it's Disney's fault for being too afraid to try anything different and insisting on exploiting his technique because, well, it worked the first time. They're no longer trying to find a team of musicians and artists to work with. They're just banking on one single guy, and that only works for so long. Lin's music works when he's given time and variety to work with it. His recent work with Warriors proves that he's actually a fantastic musician when he's not being forced to work with a bunch of shitheads. He's able to reiterate work on a song while collaborating with the natural charisma of the actors and their different attitudes. It's one of the reasons Encanto worked because he was given more freedom to come up with something creative. In most cases, Disney doesn't give him that time window, forcing him to throw a bunch of stuff into the pot without reworking it. Now the songs are turned into basic idealism and redundant exposition, and it's also a symptom of a much bigger problem. You remember when Disney used to have a slower release schedule with their movies? It allowed them to spread more time across their main films and give the staff more time to focus on a single project. But now notice how much faster Disney is releasing their bigger projects. 2019 alone saw the release of 4 live-action remakes, a mainline Star Wars movie, a Pixar movie, 3 MCU movies, and a movie from their animated canon. That's 10 major projects under the studio's belt in a single year. Now look at the number of major projects between 2023 and 2025. 1 Lucasfilm movie, 5 live-action remakes, 6 MCU movies, 3 Pixar movies, and 2 movies from their animated canon. And that's not including the content they made for a Disney Plus release. All of that together is 17. 17 major projects in 2.5 years. That is a shitload of movies for Disney to put out in that amount of time. This is exactly why their songs aren't good, because they're not allowed to be. Disney is solely focused on putting out as much content as possible in a year to make the most money, and in the process there's no room for creativity and everything is horribly rushed. They're not letting the songwriters and composers work on anything unique because they're not given the breathing room they used to have. And because they're forcing one person into the ground instead of getting a team, they can only get so much done within these deadlines. They're not even allowing Lin to make any objections, and because of how rushed these things are, it leads to all sorts of confusion during the production. We all know how horribly planned out Frozen 2 was, but that's nothing compared to what happened to Wish. You remember what I said earlier about how there was no communication between the songwriters and storytellers? Well, that's because they made the songs for the movie before they even started on the story. That explains why they don't match with the characters and the setting. This is the definition of having songs just for the sake of having songs and not making sure they fit the story. They literally just went up to the composers and said, make these songs. Alan Menken was shown the story and idea surrounding the lantern scene from Tangled before he started working on it. That's what makes I See the Light a successful romantic ballad. The song was part of the writing process, not the other way around. But here, Disney just wanted the I Want song and the villain song, etc., and didn't think about how they would fit into the narrative. The demo version of At All Cost had an actual idea behind it with the movie's original pitch. It was a love ballad, a duet of 2 people falling in love and expressing their devotion for each other. It was supposed to be between Asha and the Starboy, and instead it was given to Asha and Magnifico singing about random wishes from the people of Rosas, which creates so many problems. There's no planning behind these songs because the songwriters and storytellers aren't given any room to communicate, and with all these problems combined, the formula chasing, the terrible lyrics, not fitting the story, not properly planning them out, it results in zero diversity between every single song. They all sound exactly the same with nothing distinguishing them from each other. And looking at the production timelines, you can easily see what happened. Disney didn't want to put the needed time into these movies and just wanted to release everything in a short period of time in order to make the most money in a single year. The standard used to be 1 Pixar movie and 1 movie from their animated canon. But now that they own all these things and have turned their business into a monopoly, they don't care about taking their time. They just want to make as many movies as possible to maximize profits. It used to be the songwriters knowing the plots of the movies they were making songs for, but with all these strict deadlines, there's no room for communication. The songs aren't planned out, which results in them sounding like usual pop song sludge, and it's really disheartening for Disney to have that problem. Even some of the worst animated movies in the studio's history at least had good songs with cohesive melodies and lyrics that made sense. Now it's just pushing everything out as quickly as possible regardless if it's given any proper evaluation. It's really the fault of Bob Iger and the other CEO suits. They just want money and don't care about making something with more innovation than what they've already done. All they have to do is postpone the release of these movies by a few years apart from each other and stop trying to produce too much shit at one time. That would give the songwriters and storytellers time to communicate with each other and come up with better songs. You can have the greatest musicians, composers, lyricists, and singers in the world joining forces for your movie, and even they won't turn up anything good if they're not given a reasonable time frame to work on the songs. It's because Disney is so hell-bent at being at the top of the game that there's no room for any sort of creativity. But do you know a company that doesn't have this problem? A company that, in spite of their previous failings, has been having more consistent quality with their movies? Well, it's Sony Pictures Animation. It's honestly kinda hard to speak positively figuratively of this studio because of how they've made some pretty infamous movies in their time. The Emoji Movie, those shitty open season sequels, that one, but at the same time, they've also made some pretty good movies, including some of the best in the field of animation. Yeah, it's pretty easy to make fun of them for the shit movies they've made in the past, but they've also made some undeniably great stuff, and as of late, they've had a much better pattern of quality compared to Disney, because unlike Disney, Sony isn't trying to buy everything out and turn themselves into a monopoly. They're mostly just doing their own thing. It gives them more breathing room when producing movies because they're not trying to push out a bunch of stuff at one time, and the animation studio shows what they're capable of when given that breathing room. Even when they're not incredible movies, I can't think of anything they've made in the last 5 or 6 years that's downright god-awful. Ugh, except that one. Sony Animation has been on their own stride of good content lately, and it's worth pointing out in spite of their infamous history. And this happens to lead us into their latest home run. No, not that one. I'm of course talking about K-pop Demon Hunters. Like I said before, this movie gets a lot of things right, but the most notable strength it has is its music. Firstly, they have a huge variety. In spite of being from the same genre, they all have a unique style and placement in the story. Every musical number is vibrant, exuberant, exciting, thrilling, beautifully sung, and very well edited. Unlike Disney, who just wants to show off how good their animation is, the songs in K-pop Demon Hunters use creative visual techniques to emphasize elements of the story and characters. They properly set the tone of the scene and feel empowering based on what they're singing about. Golden properly reflects the struggles of the demon hunters while using the color of gold to represent fulfillment and wholeness. Soda Pop cleverly foreshadows the true intent of the Saja boys, using it as a metaphor for the souls of people they draw on with their music. And Takedown has the demon hunters trying to figure out how to defeat the boys while realizing they're being tempted by selfishness and losing touch of what made their pop music meaningful. All of these songs are accompanied with lyrics that develop both the characters and plot, so it's not just a bunch of nothing burgers for the sake of selling a soundtrack. Another thing that's really impressive about these songs is how they send really clever messages in the context of the story. One of the main plot points of the movie is how one of the demon hunters, Rumi, is revealed to be half demon, and eventually she crosses paths with Jinu, one of the demon boys. The two have to figure out a resolution to their conflict as they open up about their feelings for each other, and Rumi learns that Jinu isn't evil, just trapped in his situation. Their demonic halves don't make up who they are, but they were also afraid of how they would be perceived by others because of the emotions they bottled up inside. There's also an interesting contrast with the situation. Rumi was a human trying to hide her demonic blood, while Jinu was a demon trying to hide his compassion and humanity. The point of the song is helping each other break out of the rut they feel about being trapped and not being able to be true to themselves. And by opening up to each other and simply being honest about it, they confess their love for each other. In the process, Jinu is able to come to terms with all the bad things he did while developing a genuine desire to atone, making his redemption at the end satisfying and fitting. And the feelings these two are going through are represented by some really powerful lyrics. Let the past be the past till it's weightless. You got a dark side, guess you're not the only one. Lyrics that highlight Rumi and Jinu accepting each other's identities and acknowledging their humanity. These are really strong words that symbolize the deeper meaning of the song with crisp patterns and how it fits the rest of the story. This is what At All Costs should have been for Wish, a romantic ballad that shows the growth of the lovers while highlighting their devotion for each other. And the message isn't a bunch of exposition on what life lesson they're trying to send. It explores Rumi's insecurities and how her friendship with Jinu helps her discover the right angle to approach her problem. It's like I said before, the song was part of the writing process and not the other way around. It was actually made with the narrative in mind. Free isn't just a love song, it's a song about breaking free from your doubts and moving past them to grow as a person, which is crucial to the development of Rumi and Jinu's characters. Every song in the movie feels like this. They serve a practical purpose in the plot and aren't just there to sound cool or give people something to listen to on their phones. Unlike Disney, who thinks just getting talented vocalists automatically makes them good. Even if the vocals are good, it doesn't change how horribly thought out they are with context from the story. And even that isn't the end of how good the songs in K-pop Demon Hunters are. Aside from the beautiful vocal performances and profound lyrics, I think what really helps to make these songs work is their atmosphere. This movie has a really strong cult following among Asian countries, and the reason for that is because the people behind this movie and its music thoroughly understood the culture behind them. Asian pop actually has a long history of being used in a method that's sort of adjacent to how songs are used in musical theater. Asian dramas and anime work with pop artists to create songs for the opening and ending segments, but they also use them during key moments in the story, and they work really hard to come up with a musical style that matches the story and characters. It helps to express the emotions a character is going through that they can't just say normally, only being able to do so through melody. K-pop Demon Hunters cleverly adapts this style of songwriting and how it's incorporated into the story, simulating an authentic feel of Asian theater and drama shows. The people behind this movie really understood Asian culture and wanted to faithfully represent that during the song numbers. It actually reminds me a lot about how the songs worked in Encanto. They were used in a way that helped develop the story while also using the movie's culture to give them a nuanced feel. And it also highlights another reason why the songs in Wish, Mufasa, and Snow Not black white don't work, because not only are they boring filler that develops nothing, but they don't do anything to explore the atmosphere they're placed into. Songs that develop nothing and don't do anything to invigorate the worlds of their respective stories. The songs in K-pop Demon Hunters are brimming with life, not just because of the animation, but because of what's being portrayed through the visuals. Each setting feels very highly lived in, and the direction is used to show creative visual representations of how everyone is feeling and how they properly coincide with the lyrics. The world is made into an important factor because of how it's shown through song. It takes place in relatively modern day, yet it still feels timeless and mystical because of how the more fantasy elements are properly used throughout the movie. It doesn't rely on pop culture references, and the magic stuff isn't out of place. Both of them are used to establish a set for each song, and the rhythm and melody are switched up to keep them at a proper balance with each other. There's never a moment where you feel overwhelmed or pandered to because the focus is on making the music fun to listen to, and because of how well the story is visualized and directed, they're also fun to watch. All these things combined make K-pop Demon Hunters soundtrack one for the ages. It's actually incredible how these songs were incorporated into the movie to make the story surrounding it more emotionally meaningful. It's not just for the sake of sounding cool, it actually makes you understand how the characters feel as they translate their emotions through song. It's never confusing, phoned in, too fast, or overwhelming. Everything has a properly leveled amount of energy. Even if the vocal performances and instrumentation weren't as bombastic as they were, they would still be fun songs because of how they moved the story in musical form, and how they helped the characters feel more human and easier to gravitate to. Things that are overwhelmingly absent from Disney's recent musical features. It's the one thing from their movies that should have a reasonable level of quality to them. The songs don't even have to be great, they just have to not be horrible. But Disney doesn't seem to care about that. Because the company is so focused on turning their business into a monopoly with all the IPs they purchased, their release schedule is painfully congested. This is why quality over quantity is a thing, because Disney is trying to release so much shit at one time, resulting in rushed production, no planning, horrible communication within the team, lack of creativity, and overwhelming fatigue of their brand. And then their worthless dipshit white knights wonder why we act so resentful towards the garbage they've been putting out for the last 10 years. I know people are saying Disney is too set in their ways to learn anything from K-pop Demon Hunters and are willing to ignore what people are saying as long as they see enough returns from their products, but if they're ever gonna go back to making consistent content, they should at least consider it. Stop trying to be at the top of the business world and take things more slowly. Don't release a bunch of stuff at one time to the point there's no room to work on these movies properly and make sure they come out right. Because when you take things more slowly, there's more room for quality control. And it's one of the reasons why K-pop Demon Hunters is so great. Sony gave the people working on it enough elbow room without juggling a bunch of stuff at one time, focusing their resources into making a good movie. It's actually something other studios should learn from too, not just Disney. The importance of quality control and how it can only be done by giving the production of each movie enough breathing room. It's like Shigeru Miyamoto once said, "A delayed game is eventually good. A rushed game is bad forever." Rushing out these movies as fast as possible only muddies their reputation, and it solidifies what they represent. A bunch of slop that the company released not because they wanted to make good products, but just because they wanted to make money off of stupid people. For the time and money we spend on these movies, we deserve quality content, and that's not something you can do if you put all your eggs in one basket. We deserve more movies like K-pop Demon Hunters, not the repetitive MCU live-action Disney Wars wish to wanna garbage the mouse wants to normalize. While I still don't recommend getting a Netflix subscription because of their garbage services and their horribly unethical business practices, I still do advise that people give more attention to the good movies Sony Animation has put out recently, whether it's K-pop Demon Hunters or Fixed, because the industry needs more original content. It needs movies that actually care about offering something of value to the audience. It needs content that's worth people's time. It needs actually meaningful works of art, not corporate slop pretending to be those things. And if K-pop Demon Hunters taught us anything, it's that this is how it's done.